Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm joined by Dom and Padraig from Cubicle 7 to talk all things Warhammer 40k. In particular, we're going to be focusing in on Imperium Maledictum because there's an awful lot going on in the universe there at the moment. So it's great to have you both with us.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, great to be on with you.
So we do have a lot to get through because there's some outstanding news coming thick and fast every time I turn around. But the big news is obviously the first sort of beefy expansion to Imperium Maledictum is on its way via the medium of the Inquisition. Things have gone slightly wrong in the Macaria sector, and as such, the Imperial Inquisition are putting their oar in. So we're going to talk a bit about the player's guide, but do you want to give us a bit of a background to the drive with this sort of storyline, I suppose, because it's not just introducing the Inquisition, there's a theme and a story behind it within the sector itself.
Yeah, absolutely. What we wanted to do with Imperium Maledictum was have like a really strong core to the game, and then we, rather than having a different rule book for each kind of faction that you'll be exploring in the game, we can use those as faction books and opportunities to really bulk out what that faction's like to interact with, to work for, to be from. And so the Inquisition guides are the first part of that for Imperium Maledictum. So it's really exciting to be getting that first deep dive. And the Inquisition is kind of traditional, I think, to start there, isn't it? There's such I think with especially with Imperium Maledictum, that's the noir, dark kind of investigative game of Warhammer 40,000 roleplay. The opportunity to the Inquisition gives you such a breadth of topics to get into and ways of exploring that. So that's why we started here. I think that's fair, isn't it, Padraig?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was the natural place to start. But I mean, it's a template for future releases as well. And there's other factions we want to dive into. But yeah, the Inquisition were fairly irresistible. Also, I take offense to your earlier comment that things are going badly in the Macarian sector. Show me a piece of the Imperium where things are going well. I think you'll struggle.
That is true.
You'll be investigated for that heresy later, Padraig.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, I think the sector lord is doing his very best. We should all rally behind him.
Rally behind him, 100%.
Yeah, or we may have to send the Inquisition around to your place. So
it won't be the first time they've come here. Don't worry, there's still some room to bury them out back. Talking about
that's part of the plan. That's just that's what they want you to think. It's I think the Macarian sector is such an interesting part of the Imperium, isn't it? The relatively recently incorporated into the Imperium with the Macarian Crusade. I think that was what drew us to it. Was what's it like to be this huge intergalactic Imperium that's had such a rich history and lots of bad things happening as well. But you're a fairly recent sector that's been brought in. What do you make of all of that? What do the worlds that were brought into compliance as part of that crusade? What do they feel about it? How are they? How actually grounded in the Imperium are they? How compliant are they really? So it poses loads of really interesting questions, and then how the different bits of the Imperium bureaucracy and the machinery, how that integrates with that, and how it deals with everything that's being thrown up. There's loads to get into. It's a really, really interesting sector.
Well, let's get into it then. So the book itself, the player's guide anyway, we'll start with this because this is the one that everybody will be looking at. The other book that's coming a bit later for GM's eyes only. But we can see a sort of a breakdown of the contents page here, and you're saying this is going to be a sort of a format going forward for other factions within the Imperium then. So the book itself then is set up to expand, I suppose, on Imperium Maledictum's core rule set, where you have your patrons, but you also have the potential to build player characters and acolytes and that sort of thing from it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what we wanted to do was be able to give a supplement where every page was used to expanding on what the Inquisition were. This secretive organization that's imbued with just incredible power and limitless authority, facing down some of the worst things to haunt the Imperium from the dark places of the galaxy. The format that the Imperium Maledictum lets us do is give you this really robust set of rules in the IM core rulebook, the Imperium Maledictum core rulebook, and then do an expansion for the Inquisition. So this one's aimed at players. It plugs in and lets you make. So first of all, you can use it to make an Inquisition acolyte in any game. So if you already have a game of Imperium Maledictum going, you'll know the Inquisition is one of the available factions for both your player and your patron. So you can make a much more detailed inquisitorial acolyte with different sort of backgrounds suited to how they ended up in the Inquisition, like a ton of new equipment, a bunch of new talents, lots of stuff that lets you make the ultimate inquisitorial acolyte. And then on top of that, we also dive into the patron creation system, and we expand on that in the direction of Inquisitors, giving you options for, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but giving you options for creating like the ultimate Inquisitor, the ultimate sort of shadowy figure who is in charge of you as a group, but who you've created with their own boons, their own hidden liabilities, and some nasty ones for GMs to play with in here as well, I think, in that regard. But we put that patron creation stuff along with the player's guide, because a really key point for us about Imperium Maledictum is the patron creation is a player collaborative activity. It's not in our view of how you should play it. It's not confined to the GM. It's part of players giving their sort of buy-in to what sort of game they like, and then they want to play and what they want to see.
Well, I think one of the things that we've heard really good feedback on, I think, is the way that patron system ties everything together and gets the party organized on what's the word, the agreed sort of setup for the game. But the fact, I think, that your patron, yes, they're the person who's pulled you out of your place in the machinery of the Imperium, but they're also somebody with their own ambitions and plans, and you are a part of those, but you'll never know the full picture, and you'll never really understand exactly what the motivation is of your patron. Just leads to loads of great dramatic kind of conflict and really interesting bits where something will happen as part of a mission that you have been assigned to by your patron, and you're starting to think, is this as it's been presented to us, or are we up against something that's completely outside of our briefing and experience, and might not even be on our side, and sent from our patron as well to test us, or to as part of the obstacles we need to overcome. So it's a really interesting part of the game.
It's a good tool set, I think, for players and GMs.
Yeah, and with the patrons, then obviously they can be ran as antagonists to current patrons that are out there as well. Is that more of the GM side of things? Is that something we should come back to a little later in this chat?
Well, I think we can talk about it a little bit now. But there's more coming for that in the GM section, because I mean, ultimately, one of the most dangerous foes a group of inquisitorial acolytes can face down is a rival group of inquisitorial acolytes and their inquisitor. We spent a long time making sure that the various philosophies of the Inquisition are plugged in, because yes, on paper, the Inquisition is all pulling in the same way. They're the will of the Emperor made manifest, essentially, in hunting down everything that faces the Imperium. But there's incredible disagreement about how exactly that should be done. Whether that's you're a Puritan or a radical, or you subscribe, or your Inquisitor subscribes to an unusual sort of philosophy, like maybe they believe in sort of polypsychana, that the psychic awakening is the best possible thing that could happen to humanity. That's really good. Don't worry about the occasional demon. We'll deal with that. So you running into, they make excellent nemesis. Is the I suppose that horrible irony of the Inquisition generally is that they are often at each other's throats.
It's something that's come up a lot in novels in the past. Ian Watson's Inquisitor, most famously. I think it's currently in print again through the Black Library. But for people who haven't read that, and if it isn't, how much background, how much world building have you put into the player's guide to give people an idea of what the Inquisition is? Because often they are nebulous, a little threat in the background, and even in other stories and published materials, you never really see them massively front and center to a huge degree. You never, or when you do, it's in the wargaming side of things, and they focus more on their combat capabilities, not on the politic side of things. So is there a lot of that gone into the player's guide?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's what we really want to give you is a real feel for what it would be to be part of the Inquisition. And I think there's a lot spoken about the Inquisition and those conflicts between them, or between themselves, or between other branches of the Imperium, come out quite a lot. But you can't overlook the fact that they're there for a reason. And no matter how horrendous some of their methods may be, or the lengths they're prepared to go to, it is actually to preserve mankind, to save mankind from these very real threats that are, just over in the Imperium, or from the Xenos, or Tyranids. There's not really much negotiation you can do there. There's an awful lot of very real existential threats that they are fighting, and they are trying to keep people safe from. Sometimes the cure can be debatably worse than the illness itself, or communicating that very real fervor and determination and honestly felt belief that they are all that stands between the survival of humanity and a horrendous fate. I think that's really central to it, and hopefully we've communicated that well.
With the acolytes, then, these would be the roles the player characters are going to be taking on if they become part of a inquisitorial retinue or that sort of thing. How many different roles were sort of concepted here, and are they different and expansive from the ones that were in IM to begin with, or are some of them variations? Like you can have a zealot in IM. Is there a zealot equivalent that is just a case of going, well, you were on this path and now you sort of shunt onto a new path?
Well, what we try to do is add ones that can be added to the existing roles. So all of the existing roles remain quite valid as choices. But the idea of a role is this is what your Inquisitor needs you to do. So the roles say a bit more about the needs of the Inquisition than they do, anything else. So yeah, an assassin is you definitely need people removed as an Inquisitor sometimes, quietly or not so quietly, but be removed irrevocably. Cruciator equally was one that we were very interested in doing. But we played around with a lot of different ideas for how to approach this, but sometimes you need information and you have to do whatever it takes to get it. And the Imperium is more than willing. I would say they don't even turn a blind eye. They probably take notes on, exactly how horrendous that process might be. But the role is designed really to reflect the needs of the Inquisition. We went through a fair few variations on them. And our main sort of point for it, I guess, was not to make anything else feel like a zealot, but more so, or a soldier, but more so. It was to find those individual roles that would, the Inquisition is a clear need for, and the players would really love to play, and that would fulfill that sort of, fulfill their idea of what they wanted their character to be in as much way as possible. So these don't replace any of the roles; they're additions. And equally, if you're running a non-inquisitorial patron, but reckon your players they have a need for an assassin, this is a nice little player role to add on as well.
Everybody has a need for an assassin, at least once.
Broadly speaking, yeah. The Officio Assassinorum have a very high bar for getting a capital A assassin deployed to something. Sometimes you just need, a gal with a gun who's a real good shot and can deal with this for you without all that paperwork and having to talk to the High Lords of Terra. You just, you need a fixer.
Obviously, we're talking a lot about how players may play out in a more bloody and violent way, but you've actually introduced a new mechanic, which is, I think, lending itself a great deal to the style of Inquisition play that you really want to see on the table, and that's the subtlety mechanic. Do you want to tell us a bit about that and how it sort of rewards people not being gung-ho all the time?
Yeah, I mean, Dom, I feel like I talk a lot, but I can. I feel at this point people need to know what they're going to get with me, which is just talking. So do you want to take this one? Or?
No, you.
I'm sorry. Subtlety was another thing that I think works really well in almost any game of IM. Investigation first, as Dom was saying, it's a dark investigative game. and Subtlety is meant to play off that. So if fans of the core rulebook will know that there is a boon there, or a liability rather, the patrons can have, which is demands discretion. And that was just a little line of your patron would prefer you didn't invoke their name, and anytime you do, you have to answer for it. And Subtlety is sort of like that taken to a more developed degree. And the idea of Subtlety is it tracks how aware people are in your general location of the fact that there is an investigation ongoing, and in this case, an inquisitorial investigation. Because once that Rosetta starts to come out, once you start invoking the Inquisition, things change. So that opens some doors for you, of course. The Inquisition's authority is limitless, but the Inquisition also sort of relies on people to comply, and if they don't, they're empowered to deal with that with a bolt pistol if they have to. But imagine the situation: you're a planetary governor. You're used to being, with exceptions, the ultimate authority on your world. You decide who works where for how long. You've incredible latitude from the Imperium to run your world, as long as you fulfill the tithe and there's no obvious breaking of the Lex Imperialis, the rules of the Imperium. Suddenly, an Inquisitor shows up, or their acolytes show up, and they start asking questions, and they tell you, actually, this might be your world, but I am in charge now, and my authority is limitless, and I pull out this Rosetta. You of course, have to comply, but do you need to comply? Do you need to shuttle them to every part of the world where you might have a dark little secret you don't want to share, or where things aren't going quite so well as you might expect? Absolutely not. Maybe you only show them the sort of Potemkin village part of the Hive City that where everything is running perfectly, and of course there's no heresy here. And maybe it's the only level of that hive where you run regular patrols, or that the Macarian Vigilites are empowered to search. The whole point of having an inquisitorial retinue and acolytes for an Inquisitor is they can often go and stay in the background, sending the agents ahead of them. You get a look at how things really are, and maintaining that subtlety, hence the name, can be absolutely key to an investigation. And that's affected by lots of things. Like if you start whipping out multi-meltas and burning your way through Havelock doors, people ask questions and get angry about that. And then if you need to start pulling out rosettes to get out of that situation, suddenly, your cover's blown and you're not going to have that same degree of access. You'll get more access in some areas, but you're not going to get the on-the-ground, unvarnished truth anymore. And subtlety is a means of sort of tracking that's responsive to player actions. It has bonuses and negatives baked into it, but the way we see it working, hopefully, is, and I think GMs will agree and players will agree, is you want to start an investigation as subtle as you can, figure out where the bodies are buried before someone starts pouring Plascria over them. And then when you have, your evidence gathered, your ducks in a row, as it were, then break subtlety and start, start taking names and some people to drag back to your Inquisitor and point and say, yeah, he done it, and here's the proof. And that'll be good. And then at the very far end of that, where you completely blow subtlety, I think is where you start looking at the various chambers militants, and because your patron may very well be empowered by the Death Watch, if they must, or even some very scary Space Marines in subtle shade of grey, and they're going to want to. Nobody does that lightly, and that is the ultimate end of subtlety in that case.
You're into a different style there, I think, aren't you?
It's a vast spectrum, basically, and you can easily have every end of it in a campaign, or just focus on the subtle side, or whatever.
Yeah, and it makes a match as well. I think especially as we get through the different faction expansions, then you'll see little bits and pieces of different mechanics coming in, a little bit of different rules. So we're moving on to the Adeptus Mechanicus next. So you can expect all sorts of additional rules coming in there with how they are communicating the noosphere and all that sort of stuff. So there's each expansion as we move through the factions will bring different kind of optional things that you can deploy depending on the style of your game and how much you want to involve them as well. I think it was important to us for the core game to get the right level of complexity and that appropriate. You can play any faction. You can play
not overwhelm people with sheer volume of additional rules that are unnecessary in the initial core set. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It means you can also be very thematic with the mechanics that are introduced, like you've done with subtlety here, because it makes a lot of sense to have it connected to the Inquisition. It's one of those,
Yep.
if all you've got is a hammer, everything becomes nail type of thing. So all of a sudden introducing subtlety as an additional mechanic means that there is a reason for people not to be as quite as gung-ho as they need to be.
And I mean, I'm as guilty of that as anybody, because we like putting in new weapons, new equipment. Maybe you do want a sword with a demon trapped inside it, good times, all that cool stuff. But yes, equally, there's a lot of reasons that they're not your first go-to.
A lot of stuff to look forward to in the player's guide. It's on its way, but the GM guide is going to be slightly behind it in release. They're not going to be released simultaneously.
Yes, the pre-order for the player's guide and the collector's edition of the player's guide and the GM's guide is live at the moment. So if people want to check it out, then they can place a pre-order and get the PDF straight away of the player's guide. And then the GM's guide is on track to be released in PDF and that pre-order by the end of the year. So depending on when this goes out, there will be where that lands within those dates. So the GM's guide will be not too far away now.
Yeah, and you're looking there at a very nice collector's edition with both available in it, which we did put up for pre-order along with the player's guide for anyone who wanted to grab that one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it worth mentioning actually the shipping thing, Dom? Is it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry,
we
I was
were
going to say, if people aren't getting the slipcase edition, the collector's edition, they can order both at the same time, but not wait for both to arrive together. They can get the player's guide early.
Well, they will be manufactured and shipped together.
Okay.
But we didn't put the GM's guide, the standard edition, up for pre-order because we didn't have the PDF ready, and we like to be able to give people a PDF as soon as they order from us. We did realize sort of after the fact that that created a slight problem for people who wanted both, but only standard editions, because they could end up having to pay for shipping twice. So we've gone ahead and on our back end done some kind of tech magic. So anyone who got the standard edition of the player's guide will get a discount code or a link TBD.
We'll only pay shipping once anyway.
Yes, exactly. They'll get an offset for
whatever
it.
method we get to do it. But no, absolutely. They're shipping together, so we wouldn't want to be paying twice. So we got that sorted out.
And I mean, the truth is, we didn't want to ask people for money for the GM's guide until they could give them a PDF. But the response actually was people going like, "Take my money, please." I want to efficiently. Yeah, exactly. I know I'm getting this. Don't keep please help me with shipping. So we're doing that in a roundabout way, and we'll bear that in mind for future releases. That we're not holding a gun to anyone's head to make them order things if the PDF isn't ready. So sorry everyone.
It's very decent of you. So we briefly touched on the GM's guide earlier, but what sort of things will people be expecting to see in here?
Stuff, lots of stuff,
lots of stuff.
There's a lot of the history of the Inquisition is like baked into the Macarian sector heavily. Like Cryptoman, who not wrong, just early on his various plans of how to deal with Tyranids, is sometimes referred to as the hero of the Macarian heresy. As one of his plaudits, and that has like always intrigued me, because there wasn't a ton about it, but it meant that it was just such an interesting point with the heresy, and the Inquisition always had those ties. So we've dived as deeply as we can to give the GM a ton of tools to run amazing Inquisition focused campaigns in the Macarian sector. So some of that takes the form of like sector threats, which are like quite detailed threats that are in the sector, could be of interest to inquisitors of various ordos majoris, regardless of what they might be interested in, and they exist, and you can pop them into a campaign or use them as the basis of like a whole new campaign. We've popped in some case files, which are sort of like short one-shot adventures, the type of thing that you could use to get a group started, or they could you could pop them in between other adventures while you let the larger plot boil. And then we've got like a lot of advice for GMs on how to portray the Inquisition, a lot more information on how like certain probably should be prescribed philosophies of the Inquisition might play out on the tabletop and what it's like to deal with that. And then we probably have my favorite chapter, which is the Heresies Macaria. So Dom, I'll hand over.
No, everybody's favorite chapter, I think.
It is. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it has been great. So that is a campaign for you to run. And it's takes place over a period of time, and I'm trying not to give too much away now. It's always difficult to try and get that right, isn't
it? On your own blog page, it does say decades spanning.
Excellent.
So I think that's safe enough. People will have seen that.
I don't know. I'll be editing that now. That'll be
sometime. It's years long, though.
Yeah,
is the idea.
It's a huge camp. It's set around a set of conclaves that are held by the Inquisition in the Macarian sector as they try to work out how to deal with an unclear threat and put all of the links together. And there's lots of different ways of handling it that are being put forward, and everybody has their own political agenda. And it's a really, really interesting way to get that kind of insight into how the Inquisition operates at a slightly higher level, while also how you operate as one inquisitorial patron plus their acolytes. So there's a load of stuff to get your teeth into, and it's really a lovely kind of like evolving situation that you're trying to unpick and work out what's going on, and then also trying to convince others to try and get the resources to handle it. So it's not just you trying to hold back the tides of the horrible things all alone.
Yeah, it's quite. It's interesting that way. There's a couple of nice points in it that I really enjoyed, which was as Dom was saying, that you're trying to convince other Inquisitors maybe to deal with things. The Inquisition's resources are limited, and the resources of one Inquisitor even more so. So at each conclave, that you might be presented, for example, with several threats of various types. If you can make the case to your Inquisitor, that where your patron, that we got to deal with this one, definitely. That means the other ones either won't be dealt with, or another Inquisitor will deal with them, and maybe they won't do it in the way that you would have.
Here's my PowerPoint presentation as to why I need resources.
Yeah, exactly. And there'll be an element of like, well, now that has repercussions, going on the years. And something else that we really enjoyed, eagle-eyed viewers will already know that in the Player's Guide, you've got these long-term endeavors, and they were built with this sort of campaign framework in mind. And long-term endeavors are like the between adventures things where you say, like, I'm actually working on infiltrating a cult right now. That's not like a few weeks or a month or a little while in the warp or whatever. That's the work of years. And the idea for this larger framework is you can you can do that. You can work those ones in. So between conclaves, I'm going to work on dealing with this, like infiltrating the Xenos cult or this cult of the Ruinous Powers. And, you emerge a long time later, your party sees you, you've got new tattoos that are a servo skull is doing its best to laser off your face. And you're like, oh, I've seen things. You come back, but you've got an asset. You're like, okay, I know what this group is like. We can use them. We can destroy them. We can deploy them. We can hand them over to, we can use them in some way. So we think it's like, it's a campaign. It's not most of the book. It's a big chunk of the book, but it's not most of the book. We expect GMs to add sort of content to it between these conclaves, but the idea is they add like this quite juicy meta plot in the background, and they give a framework for like, run it for a long time. The Imperium's vast. The timescales we talk about, in good stories in 40k in Warhammer can often be quite long, and you can explore those and see what they're like and watch your characters evolve and change over time, and augmented replacements and terrible secrets and dark rituals, and some of them might become interrogators, some of them might or go off to become. I do see people potentially retiring a character to become like a patron for another another group. Maybe there's a future game, but it's to try and encourage people to think big.
I'm assuming it's not particularly linear then, if there are multiple ways that you can approach it.
I mean, yes, there's sort of steps. I'd verge on spoilers. There are.
It's we're all big fans of the Great Pendragon campaign, and as you'd have seen in some previous Cubicle 7 products, so it's linear in that time progresses, and there are certain things that will happen at certain times as if they're not derailed by any other actions. But the choices that the group are making are completely freeform, and there's a load of hooks and things that they can follow. Some red herrings as well, obviously, but satisfying red herrings for maybe not quite doing exactly what they think.
And it may be the Machiavellian nature of my GMing. But years ago, I ran a campaign. It was Masks. And Masks, while it has a linear timeline, it can be approached in different directions. and I had two groups, and they both started at the same date, but then they went in different directions. And depending on when somebody did something, the other group may occasionally stumble into where there should be a clue to discover that somebody was here 2 weeks earlier, did something, burnt the place down. And now I'm thinking about this in a similar way. If I was running multiple groups, not pitting them against each other, but I just love the idea of two Inquisitors sending their acolyte groups out, but then butting heads because what somebody has beat them to the punch on this one, and now they're slightly behind, or they get there first and ruin everything. That just intrigues me.
I'd love if people who would do that. I want to hear about it. Email me. Let us know.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, sounds like it's going to be an awful lot of fun. Apart from the big Macarius campaign, then there's also new patrons to be added in, as well as contacts as well for the various players. So they've got all of the core meat and potatoes of what they would expect to see from a setup for the Inquisition.
Yeah. We've got all that. We've got some pre-generated patrons with their own secrets and all the rest, their own approach to things. We do still encourage people to make their own, but this is a cast of people you can use as those rivals. And the contacts and so on we're quite intrigued by as well. We have a contact system in IM it lets you increase your influence with various factions if you sort of collect enough of them. This is more of a GM's guide for how to handle and add depth to those figures, and what they might be like. And I've always enjoyed them because there's an implicit, these guys treat you better than a contact you have good relationships with will treat you better than their faction does generally. So I always like that bit of you're back asking for favors. Do you know the kind of trouble I could get in if I sign off on one more shipment of Lasgun packs to you? Come on. I like those moments as a GM.
I think it's providing a way of dealing with all of the common questions that you'll get, but also sometimes the questions that players don't know to ask.
Mm-hmm.
You need to sort of fill in the blanks for them a little bit. How would I go about this thing that I don't know as a player, but my character would know? Mm. So things like how do I find out about things that's rolled into the contact system, and those sort of how you'd go about getting into a place, in a subtle way, finding the person who could let that happen for you if something was to happen for them as well. So the trying to anticipate those and giving everybody the tools that they have, the tools they need to deal with it well in the game.
Fantastic stuff. Seems like people are going to be having an awful lot of depth to their games being added by the upcoming Inquisition books. But it's not the only thing that's being released for Imperium Maledictum at the moment. And almost at the other end of the scale, from these two massive tomes, there is the Diagnostic Obscura, which is a much slimmer, svelte, shall we say, tome, which is already out for people to grab. And do you want to talk us through a bit about what's inside this little PDF? Because as you can see, it's only 19 pages long. But
it's competitively priced. You'll get this quicker than you'll get something nice in a large coffee chain. And this is a digital release. I really enjoyed working on this one. Myself and the writer worked. We put a lot of heart into it. We also where it was coming from was players keep getting injured, and that's fine and fair. But something that comes up in a lot of games is, well, who do I go to for treatment for this?
Mm-hmm.
And Diagnostic Obscura sets out to sort of answer that question in the sense of here's 3 unique Medicaid professionals, at least dubiously applied word there in one case.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, indeed, Noxia. But these are various people you can deal with. They have a sort of a table of Medicaid treatments they can provide. There's a really in-depth look at what their clinic is like, what they're like, their sort of bedside manner, if you will, their background. And this is back to I don't want to give too much away, but if we were just doing profiles on 3 people and their treatment tables, that would not have been a 20-page PDF. We also go very deep into the background of all these figures, various things they might ask you to do while you're under the knife, as it were, under the diagnoster. For them, maybe in exchange for better medical treatment, maybe they can act as a patron for you. Either from the get-go, this is a good figure for a patron, or someone that your patron as a favor assigns you to help with for a while, or someone your patron assigns you to investigate and see what they're about. Maybe foil their plans as much as go through with them. But all of them have a background, a history, various schemes they would like to see enacted, all for the betterment of the Imperium, clearly. And it's a nice bit of meat for your players to get involved with. And I think most GMs will agree that players get injured. It's always good to have a couple of medical NPCs on hand should they be required.
Yep. Especially in a system like IM where, you're not shrugging off mortal injuries easily. No. You're bleeding out in the puddle, and your friends are desperately firing.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, certainly according to one of them, it is. But there's a couple of intriguing things in this that I'd like to highlight for people. One is that there's almost a tiered scale of sawbone that you're going to, from the back alleys, bottom of the hive to top of the spire. So depending on the group that you're playing, it makes more sense for them to have access to one rather than the other, or more easier access. They obviously have their own space within the Macarius sector, but they can be shuffled around if people want to shuffle them, depending on the games they're running.
Different levels of attention you may attract as well, depending on where you're going.
Noxie of X will barely even ask you what's wrong with you. Very few questions asked. You'll find some of the other ones may ask more. That was a very deliberate choice. Was to cross the social strata basically as much as possible, because the Imperium's vast, and it's never provincial, and getting something as simple as trying to see a doctor can be a challenge for some, probably most people. So we wanted to give a broad selection of that. So depending how many solars you have in your pocket, how well connected you are, how well connected your patron is, you may have no choice but to head to the bottom of the hive and hope there's a good sawbones around, or you may be able to access the very one of the most talented magus biologists in the sector and have them see to you with all the blessings the machine cult can grant.
And that's another thing where they all have the same treatment table, and it really highlights on that for example, the top of the spire, if you're going to go and see the mages, he will not patch you up. That is beneath him. It's all or nothing. And I love that, the fact that it just goes, this isn't even a roll that's going to be made on this table. Don't even ask him for this. It's below him. It's offensive. You'll be shown out or used for parts if you do that. So it's a really intriguing way of adding something that's a very simple core mechanic that every group will need at some point. But then there's also the option to expand on the people within it, depending on the GM as well. So there's little story arcs and adventures that they can be used to either drop in as one shots into a campaign or to expand it into a new direction as well. So it's not just here's 3 characters that will heal you. It's here's 3 characters and a bunch of adventures, each linked to one of the characters in particular.
Yeah, and each one of them ends in a sort of an Apex mission.
Apex,
which is their sort of like resolve their plot a little bit, as it were. And depending on how that goes for you, you might have a friend for life, or another body you need to find somewhere to bury. But
running out,
exactly. Expand the back garden, and it depends on the players and everything else as well. But it's part of my sort of philosophy as a GM is like, anytime you can name every NPC, give them a bit of backstory and depth, and it's not about taking the light away from the players. It's about making the world feel richer and more organic and real, and to help them get into the setting. So I think if you rock up and the GM says, you get some treatment, it's here, that can be fine, and I can get you back in action quickly. But I find it more interesting myself if the medic takes a long look at you and says, no, come back when you're more injured. One of my attendants will see you. Get out of here.
Oh, absolutely. I think it helps GMs to do their world building, doesn't it? I think I think what we're here for is providing those building blocks and those nice sort of interesting features and things like that. But then it's for each GM to take those bits and assemble it into their version of the IM world. So it's I think we've been trying different ways of making that kind of stuff available with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay.
Yeah.
We have the Archives of the Empire books that we've been doing, and with Wrath and Glory for Warhammer 40,000 Roleplay, we've had the my brain is
Redacted Records
today. Thank you, Redacted Records. So where we were looking for putting our magazine-y style content in. I always loved articles in magazines, and working out what's the best way of continuing to do those. And we've tried a mix of kind of PDF only things and those compilation kind of books. So I think at the moment, I think that the PDFs probably winning. We're working on a completely new format for PDFs as well at the moment. So we'll have a bit more of that in the future, the near future actually, with something for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, but looking at a way that we can deliver things in just a more useful way. It's interesting. I think with PDFs, you've got a lot of those options for sort of like zooming into things and pulling out little bits here and there. So lots of things that we're working on at the moment. But
I assume something like Diagnostic Obscura, then they're more ad hoc. They're not going to be a regimented series. It'll be a case of you'll get this one now, and then there might not be anything that you feel is worthwhile putting down on the PDF and 4 weeks, months, whatever happens. But then you go, actually, that would make a really good one of these. It may not have gone into, it may be something excised from a book going, well, this is too big for the page count in this book, but that we can maybe snip that out.
It's a really nice
and
idea. We'd really like to do something, something with it. And it's, I think it'll probably, there's always a huge number of ones that we want to do. We've always got more ideas that we can actually sort of get down on the page. But I think that it gives us the opportunity to do those. And again, I suppose it lets us really let our interests lead us as well in which ones we're doing. It's not about filling a part of a book. Being freed from that gives us the opportunity to really, follow our interests, and I think that comes through in the ones that we do. But watch the space for the PDFs. There's some interesting things going on. And, I could see that being a really constant kind of thing that we'll always have something sort of bubbling away with.
Fantastic stuff. Not the only digital bit of kit that's coming out though. Imperium Maledictum is joining Foundry.
Indeed, we've had the rule set's been up for a little while now, but the starter set has just joined it. So that's fantastic to have that introductory adventure and all of the all of the guide to
a lot of nice material in that starter set. If people aren't aware of it, it's great for starting the game. It's got what would be in print a 48-page adventure that teaches the rules you play, and then a 64-page guide to Hive Rorquart, which is the capital sort of hive city of Vol, which is an acid-soaked nightmare and among the safest places to live in the Macarian sector. Both of those are true. Which isn't saying a lot in either direction. But it's a really nice place to start. There's pre-generated characters. The team who work on the sort of translations to the Foundry, the digitization of the game, have done a really good job. So you get that nice sort of like map of the hive. Click on things, they pop up with a bit more detail and so on. They call them journal articles, is the way I refer to them. But lots of nice stuff. So I think anyone who's familiar with the Foundry already, and maybe is already playing IM, will love this. And if you're not, it's a really good place to take a look at the Foundry and see if it's VTT for you, and get started with IM right away. And the starter set's a good point to jump in.
Yeah, and leads into the first adventure book that's coming from Imperium Maledictum as well.
Yeah, exactly. We know people want more adventures. We're working on them. So Vol Adventures will be the first book, and that's Vol again is the world that Hive Rorquart is on. It was almost Rorquart Adventures, but not all of them are exactly in the hive, so I feel it would be misleading. So
overthinking. We did.
Yes, exactly, on everything.
Maybe it's just my age, but I was just thinking the Rockford Files. Just Rock Files instead. That'd be good.
Could be, yeah.
There's always time.
Yeah, that one's coming along. So all the writing is in for that one. We've been reviewing it. We're very happy with a lot of it. There's some real bangers. There's the single most lethal IM profile I've done for a game in this one.
That one could go badly wrong.
That one won't go badly wrong at all. It's fine. You're not meant to fight everything in IM, and this is just that written large.
At least they'll have access to good medical facilities now.
Indeed.
Yeah, exactly.
Choice of.
Yep. Whatever bucket they pour you into, they can bring right to that Magus Biologist, and he'll find use for you.
It definitely counts as sufficiently injured to be worth
it does. It will. So that's exciting. We're looking forward to that. We're also looking forward to a couple of other books, Dom, right?
Yes, absolutely. We've got the Requisition Guide, which was equipment and all sorts of equipment that you might choose to attempt to requisition. There's a lot of great stuff in that one.
Gear and services.
I was going to say, people count as requisitionable items because it is the Imperium after all.
Indeed.
Yeah. Well, luckily, solars speak well in most of the worlds in the Macarian sector. If you've got enough of them, you can usually get your way. Someone will forge the requisition paperwork, I believe, is what's happening in many cases, but for the right payment. But yeah, they're really looking forward to that one. And yeah, as Tom was saying, loads of great stuff in that. And I think that's one that will be useful on every table.
Yeah.
Basically. Whatever your style of play. So that will be good fun. And we also have the title sort of pending book of Conspiracies that we wanted to delve into. So we've been very interested in bringing the story of the Macarian sector sort of not forward exactly, but like bringing depth to it at every location. So whatever the GM might be interested in and whatever the players seem intrigued by, there's a sort of a fractal thing can happen where you can zoom in a bit and there's more detail and more intrigue and always more layers to the onion that is the Macarian sector. So the Conspiracies book, I think you've been particularly excited about that one, Dom.
No, absolutely. Yeah, that's. It kind of goes back to that point you were making earlier about the other patrons working against you, and if they're not on your side, then you can be using them as antagonists. The Conspiracy book leans into that. So there's lots of threats that are happening across the sector. And there's just all the different kind of like branches of those and the weird things that you can stumble into, and it could be that you'll stumble into them quite gradually, picking up a rumor over a rumor every other adventure, or you'll start to piece together, hang on, this is a weird thing that was happening in this one adventure that we didn't quite wrap up, and then you see something similar in the next one, and that leads you into, oh my god, there's this huge thing going on that was we were completely blindsided by. There's the best part of 1,000 systems in the Macarian sector, so there's a huge amount of space for things to be going on. From the local and the small scale through to massive, proper sort of top level conspiracies that could threaten the very Imperium itself. And sometimes it is just someone's trying to make a quick buck or two, and it's got a bit out of hand.
It's in the single most reckless way possible.
Gotta love rogue traders. We've accidentally brought down the Macarian sector, but I've made a profit. Seems like somebody needs an Inquisitor set on them.
For a brief moment, we create a lot of value as the world burns around them. Yeah,
is a rogue trader too big to fail?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, yeah, sounds absolutely.
I love all of those sort of as Padraig was saying, all the different layers and all those sort of like plots that are going on simultaneously all of the time, and you might stumble into one or two, or they might cross over and cause bigger problems, or could roll into some of the threads that were kicked off in the Heresies Macaria in the Inquisition GM's guide as well. So I think it really helps to bring the setting to life when you've got that level of activity going on, and it's something that I'm always really keen to have in our games, is that yes, you've got your main plot and you mustn't distract your players too much, otherwise you'll never get anything done. But that feel of a living, breathing setting with all of these different things going on, I think that really helps for me on the games that I played. I enjoyed that.
Just leave the conspiracy book sitting on the table and not have any conspiracies in your campaign at all, and just let your players go absolutely insane trying to work out what it is. It's just,
Yeah.
The real conspiracies were the paranoias they made along the way.
That's it.
Yeah. Get them to make rolls and then ask, "Are you sure? Oh yeah, how many? What was the last digit of that? Okay," and then make notes.
I make a note and do nothing.
Yeah, exactly. The right sort of attitude.
I love being a GM. It's great fun. It seems like there's an absolute wealth of stuff coming for IM then over the coming weeks and months. Is there anything else that you want to give us hints about before we shoot on into the vastness of the sector?
I think we talked a bit about the Adeptus Mechanicus being the next faction up after that. We're open for bribes for the one after that. Not really. More it's sort of internal fights, ammunition for our squabble over what we
give us good arguments and we'll place them. There's a lot we'd like to dive into.
Knights.
There's a good argument to be made for the Administratum, I think. But it may be. Well, we'll see. Basically, make your arguments. Make your
arguments for knights, and
But the Adeptus Mechanicus, I'm really excited for that one because I don't think they've had a really in-depth treatment in any role-playing game set in the Imperium thus far.
You have playable options, but not that depth of a faction kind of deep dive.
Yeah, but not like a full, and we want to do a full 2-book treatment for them and give a player's guide, so you can be all sorts of like cyborgs of various sorts and all sorts of people who might be working within the Adeptus Mechanicus. And then, guides for patrons and all the like, but then also a GM's guide. And I want to try and, with the GM's guide, hit upon a similarly like compelling sort of framework for how to do a really good campaign with the Adeptus Mechanicus. So I'm excited for that. We have our ideas and it's barely to talk about them, but
it's been a really versatile setup, I think, for us. We knew we were going to be doing this structure for the line from the very beginning. But I think the more that we've got into the Inquisition GM, players and GMs guides, it's just really suited it really well. Even down to being able to have some slight differences in the tonal presentation of the same information across the two, one aimed at players and one aimed at GMs. It's really versatile. It's given us a lot of tools and a lot of it's great to know that the things are locked away in the GMs, but you don't have to worry about how you're talking about anything, and you can really nail the player's presentation. And then, you can go a lot more speculative when you get into the GM's guide. So, that's worked really well for us.
Yeah,
been a blast. I think people enjoy that one. But and the GM's book for the Inquisition will give you a good flavour of what you might expect in the GM's guide for the Adeptus Mechanicus when it comes out. So keep an eye out for that one.
Fantastic stuff. It's been an absolute joy catching up with both of you. Obviously, we've only touched on Imperium Maledictum, and it's only one string to the many that you have on your bow. So we'll have to sit down and do this again for something else. You have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to systems and themes as well. So we'll get back together and we'll have another chat in the not too distant. If anybody wants to follow you, the best place, I suppose, is straight over to your own website where they can keep an eye on anything Imperium Maledictum or into the blog itself. So they can go to cubicle7games.com. There is one for Imperium Maledictum, or they'll be able to go into the blog, which is hardly falling over at the moment.
I deleted it. I panicked about what I'd said before about the campaign.
Is that what it was? The decade-spanning scenario has had for us. But yes, they'll be able to go there.
So someone forgot to placate a machine spirit.
They need to go and rub rare unguents onto that. But otherwise, they can check you out on Facebook as well, and we'll be in touch constantly. So if anybody has any questions, please drop them below. We'll pass them across to Padraig and Dom. Until next time, bye-bye.
Yeah.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.